Hey students, this is lesson 2.4, deductive reasoning. We're going to learn how to use the law of detachment and the law of syllogism. Go ahead and do this review. I'll check back with you. All right, so our first property that we're going to talk about here is called the law of detachment. And basically what it says is if the hypothesis of a true conditional is true, then the conclusion is true. So, and we're going to use that to, we're going to just do a couple examples of that so you can get used to that. So here we have a conditional, and I'm just going to underline the hypothesis here if it is raining outside, and then I'll circle the conclusion. And the second statement is giving us the hypothesis. So what this law of detachment tells us is that if we have the hypothesis, then the conclusion follows. So it is also true. So we're going to say that in this case, since it is raining, we're going to conclude there are clouds in the sky. Okay, and then the second one says if Malcolm scores at least 85% on his final exam, so that's the hypothesis right there, then he will earn an A, that's the conclusion. And it says Malcolm scores a 90%, and 90% is at least 85, so we have that the hypothesis is true here. So we can say that Malcolm scores, Malcolm will earn an A for the term. Malcolm will earn an A for the term. All right. The last one, it says given two angles are vertical. Given if two angles are vertical, then they are congruent. And we're told that angles 3 and 4 are vertical angles. So again, our hypothesis is two angles are vertical. If we have that, then we can conclude the conclusion that they are congruent. And we are given that angles 3 and 4 are vertical angles, so we can conclude that angles 3 and 4 are congruent. And that's by the law of detachment. I'll let you try that. One thing to note here is, like, let's say that my conditional is if it is sunny, then I will wear sunscreen. So let's now say that I'm wearing sunscreen. That does not imply that it is sunny. That's an example of improperly using the law of detachment. You have to have the hypothesis to be true in order to assume the conclusion. If you just know the conclusion, you can't assume the hypothesis. So, all right, our other law that we're going to be learning is called the law of syllogism. You can state a conclusion from two true conditionals or more when the conclusion of one statement is the hypothesis of the other statement. So if P then Q is true, and if Q then R is true, then if P then R is true, this is kind of like the transitive property in a way. And that could go on also. You could have even more statements. You could have if P then Q is true, and if Q then R is true. And if S then T is true, you could conclude that if P is true, then T is true. So here's just some examples. Go ahead and see if you can fill it in using that, and I'll check back with you. All right, so let's look at some examples here. It says, what can we conclude from the given information? It says if a number is divisible by 12, then it's divisible by 6. If a number is divisible by 6, then it's divisible by 3. And so if we're going to use syllogism, we have to make sure that the conclusion of the first conditional, which is it is divisible by 6, matches up to the hypothesis of the second conditional, which in this case, a number is divisible by 6. If that is true, then we can conclude what is stated in the second condition, that if a number is divisible by 12, then it is divisible by 3. In the second statement, it says if a figure is a square, then the figure is a parallelogram. So that's our first hypothesis, and here's our conclusion. If the figure is a rectangle, then the figure is a parallelogram. In this case, our conclusion matches our conclusion, and if that's happening, then we can't use syllogism. So we're going to say we can't conclude anything because our conclusion in the first conditional does not match the hypothesis in the second conditional. So I'm talking about this has to match this, and it doesn't, so we can't use syllogism here. I'll let you try that. All right, you can use the law of syllogism and the law of detachment together to make conclusions. So here we have a conditional. If you live in Cincinnati, then you live in Ohio. If you live in Ohio, then you live in the United States. And then it says Ken lives in Cincinnati. Well, right away we can conclude from this first information, since our conclusion, you live in Ohio, matches our hypothesis, you live in Ohio. We can use the law of syllogism, so let's just call that law of syllogism, to come up with a new conditional. If you live in Cincinnati, then you live in the United States. Now we're told that Ken lives in Cincinnati, so we are given the hypothesis of this one, so by the law of detachment, we can conclude that Ken lives in the United States. All right, I'm going to let you try that. All right, go ahead and do the lesson check. And next time I see you in class, we'll go over this.